Have you ever wondered if there's still time to start over? If after decades of living one way, it would be possible to wake up one day and simply decide to be someone else? At 72, Margaret did just that. And it wasn't a small change, you know? It wasn't just changing her hair color or starting a walk in the park, it was much more. She woke up on an ordinary Tuesday morning, stared at her bedroom ceiling as she had for the past 50 years, and whispered to herself, "I'm going to live like I'm 20 again." And that was it. That was it. The decision was made. Now you might be thinking, what do you mean? That's crazy. And believe me, many people around her thought exactly that. But stay with me until the end of this story, because what she did after this decision will make you question everything you think you know about aging, about limits, and about what it truly means to be alive. Margaret wasn't an extraordinary person. At least she wasn't considered that way. She had a predictable routine, the kind where you can guess the day of the week just by looking at what she was doing. Monday was laundry day. Wednesday, a trip to the supermarket. Saturday, a phone call to her grandchildren. Sunday, church. She lived like this for so long that she even forgot that one day had been different, that she once had giant dreams, impossible plans, an overwhelming desire to devour the world. But life happened, as it does to everyone, and those dreams were pushed to the sidelines, stored in a mental drawer she swore never to open again, until something changed. Have you ever been there? That moment when you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back? I'm not just talking about your body, your wrinkles, your gray hair. I'm talking about your soul, the feeling that you stopped being yourself somewhere along the way and didn't even realize it. That's what happened to Margaret that Tuesday morning. She woke up and felt an emptiness so deep, so terrifying, that for the first time in decades, she was afraid. But it wasn't fear of dying. It was fear of never having truly lived. So right there, sitting on the edge of her bed, she made the most radical decision of her life. She was going to start over. No matter what others thought, no matter how many decades had passed, she was going to pursue everything she had abandoned. She was going to do everything she had always wanted to do. She was going to be the person she had always dreamed of being, as if she were 20 again, as if time were just a number on the calendar and not a prison sentence. But here's the part you need to know. Her path wasn't easy. In fact, it was brutally difficult. There were tears, there were falls, there were moments when she almost gave up. Her family thought she was having a crisis. Her friends whispered behind her back. Her own body protested every new attempt. And yet, she kept going. What you're about to discover now may surprise you, because what Margaret achieved wasn't just a life-changing experience. It was a complete revolution. And what happened next will inspire you to rethink your own choices, to question your own excuses, and who knows, find the courage to start over. Now, before I tell you what Margaret actually did, I need to pause here with you, because if you've made it this far in the video, it's because something in this story touched you in some way. Maybe you have your own dreams on hold. Maybe you know someone who needs to hear this. Maybe you're at that point in your life where you feel like it's past time, too late. And I want to tell you something. It's not. But here's the detail that many people don't realize. When you leave a comment below telling your own story, sharing what you felt, what touched you at that moment, you're not just interacting with me. You're creating a chain of inspiration that reaches others. Someone will read your comment tomorrow, next week, a month from now, and will find exactly the strength they needed to take that first step. So I invite you now, stop for a second, scroll down to the comments, and tell me, what dream have you left behind? What version of yourself are you waiting to come back to life? Share it with us, because your story matters as much as Margaret's. And if this kind of content resonates with you, if these real stories of overcoming and starting over move you in some way, leave a like below. It may seem like a small gesture, but it's this gesture that shows the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be seen by more people. This is how we reach that person who's at their bedside right now, wondering if it's still worth trying. And look, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the bell, because every week I bring you real stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things, people who proved that it's never too late, that there's always time, that life can start over as many times as necessary. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear these messages. It's what motivates me to continue digging up these stories and bringing them to you. So now, with you by my side, let me tell you exactly what Margaret did when she made that radical decision. But before that, you need to know who she really was, because that's the part that will make you understand why this story is so powerful, so real, so similar to the lives of millions of people out there. Margaret was 72 when everything changed. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she didn't have anything extraordinary on her resume. She was an ordinary grandmother, the kind you see at the supermarket carefully choosing fruit, who waves to the neighbors every morning, who watches the news after dinner. She had 3 grown children, 5 grandchildren who visited occasionally, and a small house in the suburbs where she'd lived alone since her husband passed away 7 years earlier. Her routine was so predictable that the mailman knew exactly when she would open the door to get the mail. Mornings always began at 6:30, with a cup of lukewarm coffee and the kitchen window open, watching the sunrise in silence. But here's the hidden truth that few realized. Behind that quiet routine, Margaret carried a huge weight. She felt like she'd become invisible. You know that feeling when the world just keeps spinning and you've become just part of the landscape? That's exactly what it was. Her children called once a week, always rushing, always in a hurry. Her grandchildren barely looked up from their phones when they came to visit. And she, who had once been a vibrant woman, full of dreams and plans, now saw herself as just the old lady who baked cookies and smiled politely while everyone lived their fast-paced lives around her. Margaret was afraid to admit she was unhappy, afraid to seem ungrateful. After all, she was healthy, had a home, had a family. Who was she to complain? But deep down, she knew something had died inside her over the years. That young woman who once dreamed of being a dancer, who wanted to travel the world, who read poetry under the trees and believed life was a grand adventure, had disappeared. And Margaret couldn't even remember when it happened. It was gradual, one decision at a time, a dream postponed here, another abandoned there, until one day she woke up and realized she had spent decades living the life others expected of her, but never the life she truly wanted. And that's what made her make that decision that Tuesday morning. It wasn't a moment of euphoria or inspiration. It was a moment of quiet desperation. It was looking in the mirror and wondering, if I die tomorrow, will I die happy? And the answer was so clear, so devastating, that she had no choice. She had to change. She had to try. Even if it was too late, even if it was ridiculous, even if no one would understand. Because the alternative was to continue slowly fading away, day after day, until there was nothing left of her but an empty shell fulfilling a meaningless routine. What if time didn't take away your dreams, but just waited for the right moment to make them come true? Comment below. What dream from your youth still lives inside you, waiting for the moment to come true? But what she did first was something no one expected. And here's where the story gets even more intense, because what happened wasn't just a mental decision. It was a moment so visceral, so profound, that it changed the course of everything. Let me take you back to that exact moment that transformed Margaret forever. It was a Friday night. Margaret was sitting in the living room, alone as always, watching an old movie on television. Suddenly, a scene appeared on the screen. A woman dancing freely, twirling in the rain, completely lost in the music, alive in a way Margaret hadn't felt in decades. And it was in that second that something broke inside her. It wasn't a delicate tear streaming down her face. It was a desperate cry, the kind that comes from deep within you when you finally stop pretending everything is okay. She cried for everything she had sacrificed. She cried for the dancer she never became. She cried for the trips she never took. She cried for the life she had lived on autopilot, always doing what was expected, never what she truly wanted. That night, Margaret realized something devastating. She had spent the last 50 years living as if she were just waiting for the right moment that never came, waiting for permission from people who would never give it, waiting for someone to notice she was disappearing. But no one noticed, because everyone was too busy with their own lives. And the most painful truth of all hit like a punch. She was the only person who could save herself. No one else would come and do it for her. It was there, on that cold living room floor, with red eyes and a broken heart, that Margaret made the most radical decision of her life. She wouldn't wait any longer. She wouldn't ask permission. She wouldn't care if people thought it was strange, ridiculous, or impossible. She was 72 years old, yes, but she was still breathing. She still had strength in her legs. She still had dreams buried deep within her. And if she didn't do something now, right now, she knew she would die with all those dreams still inside her. And that thought was unbearable. The next morning, Margaret woke up different. She was no longer the resigned woman who silently accepted her fate. She was someone with a mission, with a burning fire she thought she had extinguished long ago. She realized that life was passing by and she was merely watching, a spectator of her own existence, but no longer. From that day forward, she would be the protagonist. No matter how many chapters had already been written, she would rewrite the ending of her story the way she had always wanted. And the first step was the scariest of all. She had to admit to herself and to the world that she wasn't happy, that she wanted more, that she deserved more, even at 72, even when everyone expected her to simply accept old age with grace and silence. But accepting wasn't an option, not when there was still so much to live for. And it was from this mindset of absolute fresh start that the most incredible transformation imaginable was born. What if every tear shed was actually the fuel needed to be reborn? And what came after this awakening was a journey she never imagined she was capable of. But here's the part no one tells you when they talk about new beginnings and transformations. The real, raw, unfiltered part. Because deciding to change is one thing. Facing the world after that decision is something else entirely. The first obstacle Margaret faced didn't come from outside. It came from within. It was those voices in her head. You know? That insistent voice telling her she was being ridiculous, that women her age didn't do such things, that she should accept her place and stop dreaming. Every morning, when she woke with that new determination burning in her chest, those voices returned with full force. And there were days, many days, when she almost gave up before she even began. Because fighting your own inner demons is the hardest battle there is. No one sees it, no one knows, but that's where most people give up, before even taking the first real step. But Margaret was stubborn. And when she finally mustered the courage to tell her children what she intended to do, the reaction was exactly what she feared. Her oldest son laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, but the nervous laugh of someone who thinks their mother is having a breakdown. Her middle daughter became concerned and suggested she see a doctor, perhaps a psychologist, because she was clearly going through something. And her youngest son simply ignored her, changing the subject as if she hadn't said anything. None of them took her seriously. To them, Margaret was just the mother who had always been there, stable, predictable, safe. Seeing her wanting something different, something wild, something so off-script was disturbing. It was easier to believe she was confused than to accept that she was finally waking up. And the criticism didn't stop there. Her church friends whispered. Her neighbors gave her judgmental looks. Some people told her to her face that she was too old to be pulling such antics. Starting over isn't easy at any age, but at 72, everyone doubted it. And every comment, every look, every snicker was like a stab at the confidence she was trying to build brick by brick. But worse than the judgment of others were the physical limitations she had to face. Her body was no longer the 20-year-old one she longed to recapture. Her joints ached, her breath was short, her energy was waning, and there were moments when she looked in the mirror and wondered, am I being deceived? Is it really possible to start over when your own body seems to be telling you otherwise? These doubts were devastating because they were based on something concrete, something she couldn't simply ignore. There were falls, literal and metaphorical. There were days when she cried in frustration because something that should have been simple was exhaustingly difficult. There were times when she felt completely alone on this journey because no one around her understood, no one supported, no one believed. And the fear of failure was so intense that it sometimes paralyzed her completely. What if she tried and failed? What if she proved to everyone that they were right and she was wrong? This fear was almost suffocating, but there was something that kept her going, even when everything seemed to be crumbling around her, and that something changed everything. Write in the comments, what is the biggest obstacle preventing you from starting over something you've always wanted to do? Because what Margaret discovered in this painful process was a revolutionary truth, and it was through a victory so small it almost went unnoticed. But this victory changed absolutely everything. Let me tell you the exact moment she proved to herself that it was possible. 3 weeks after that decision to start over, Margaret was browsing the internet when she came across an ad for beginner dance lessons. Dance. The thing she'd dreamed of her entire life. The thing she'd abandoned at 18 because they said it wasn't practical, didn't make money, wasn't serious. She stared at that screen for almost an hour, the mouse trembling in her hand. The fear was immense. Imagine yourself, at 72, walking into a room full of younger, more agile, more prepared people. Imagine the ridicule, the shame, the weight of 50 years of lost dreams on your shoulders. But she clicked. She signed up. And when she pressed the confirm button, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades, butterflies in her stomach. Fear, yes, but also pure excitement. The first class was a disaster. Margaret stumbled, lost her rhythm, and completely lost her footing. She was the only person over 60 in the room. All eyes were on her, some curious, others clearly judgmental. And halfway through, she felt the tears welling up. She considered running away, never coming back, accepting that her dream had truly passed its expiration date. But then something unexpected happened. The instructor, a young woman named Sarah, stopped beside her and whispered, "You're here. This is already a victory. We'll build on the rest." And those simple words were like a life preserver thrown into the middle of the ocean. Margaret returned the following week, and the next, and the next, and something began to happen. She didn't become better overnight, but with each class, she could remember a step more, follow a rhythm more, feel the music more. And by the 5th class, it happened. She completed the entire choreography without a mistake. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't professional, but it was hers. And when the song ended and she realized what she had just done, she burst into tears right there, in the middle of the studio. But this time, they weren't tears of frustration. They were tears of pure accomplishment. She had done it. At 72, she was dancing again. That first achievement, however small it seemed from the outside, had a devastating ripple effect on her life. Because when you prove to yourself that you can do something impossible, you begin to question what else is possible. Margaret left that studio with a confidence she hadn't known in half a century. If she could dance, what else could she do? If she could defy expectations in one area, why not in others? And so, with small but steady steps, she began to expand the limits she had long accepted. Dance was the door that opened all other doors. It was concrete proof that age really was just a number when you decided it was. And that revelation changed everything. And if you think the story ends there, you have no idea what's to come. Because that first dance victory was just the beginning of a transformation so profound that even Margaret was surprised by the woman she was becoming. And the most fascinating thing is that she didn't become a different person overnight. It was a gradual process, built brick by brick, decision by decision, day after day. 2 weeks after that first complete routine, Margaret woke up and did something she'd never done in her life. She went to the gym, not to do the light treadmill walks everyone would expect from a 72-year-old woman. No, she hired a personal trainer and told him quite clearly, "I want to get strong, I want to have energy, I want my body to keep up with my mind." And the trainer, after verifying her medical fitness, put together a program for her. Nothing crazy, nothing dangerous, but challenging enough to make her feel like she was truly changing. Her routine changed completely. Mornings were no longer about lukewarm coffee and solitude. They were about waking up at 6, eating a nutritious breakfast, and hitting the gym at 7. 3 times a week, she danced. Twice a week, she did lightweight training and stretching. And on weekends, she started doing something she'd always wanted to do: watercolor. She signed up for a beginner's painting class and discovered she had a natural talent she'd never explored. Each brushstroke was a form of expression she'd suppressed her entire life. But here's the thing many people don't realize. Margaret didn't change everything all at once. She didn't wake up one day and become a superhero. It was gradual. At first, she just danced. Then she added the gym. Then she painted. Each new habit built on the previous one, creating a solid foundation. And most importantly, she was kind to herself when she made mistakes, when she failed, when she had bad days. Because her mindset had shifted. She was no longer striving for perfection. She was striving for life. And with these changes came new friendships. At the dance studio, she became close with Sarah, the instructor, who was 45 and saw Margaret as a living inspiration. At the gym, she met others her age who were also seeking to live more intensely. At the watercolor class, she befriended a diverse group of people who shared her passion for art. For the first time in years, Margaret was no longer socially isolated. She had a community, people who saw her, who listened to her, who cared about her beyond their role as grandmother or mother. Her goals also evolved. At first, it was just to get back to dancing. Then, she became more ambitious. She wanted to put on a dance performance for her family. She wanted to finish a series of 10 paintings about her journey. She wanted to be able to do 10 push-ups in a row. Each goal achieved generated a new goal, and what once seemed impossible now seemed merely challenging. And challenging was exactly what she was looking for. Write down, what new habit would you like to add to your life if you weren't afraid to start? But there's a side to this transformation that's even more powerful than any physical change. It's about how Margaret's journey began to touch those around her in ways she never imagined. Because when you change, you don't change alone. Your transformation creates ripples that reach everyone in your life, whether you want them to or not. 6 months after that initial decision, Margaret was preparing for her first dance performance at the studio. It was a small event, just for friends and family. But for her, it was huge. She'd invited her children, her grandchildren, and a few neighbors. And I expected maybe 1 or 2 to show up out of politeness. But when she arrived at the studio that Saturday afternoon, everyone was there. All 3 children, all 5 grandchildren, and even some friends from church who had been critical at first. The audience was there, waiting, and you could feel the tension in the air. Could the old lady really do it? Could this all just be a fantasy? And then the music began, and Margaret danced. It wasn't a Broadway performance. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was true. Every movement carried 50 years of repressed dreams. Every turn was a declaration that it's never too late. And when she finished, the silence in the room lasted 3 seconds that felt like an eternity, until her middle daughter, the one who had suggested a psychologist months ago, began to cry. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a cry that came from the depths of her soul. And she stood up, went to Margaret, and hugged her mother with a strength she hadn't shown in years. And through her tears, she whispered, "I've spent my whole life watching you sacrifice your dreams for us. Seeing you finally live for yourself is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." And it wasn't just her. Her eldest son, the one who had laughed at first, had red eyes. He later admitted that he had spent months mentally ridiculing his mother, thinking it was a late-onset midlife crisis. But seeing her there, glowing, more alive than he'd remembered her in decades, broke something inside him. It made him question his own excuses, his own abandoned dreams. If his mother could do this at 72, what was stopping him from making the changes he'd been putting off at 48? The grandchildren had an even more profound reaction. The eldest granddaughter, 16, who had always seen her grandmother as just the old lady who baked cookies, suddenly saw Margaret as a real person, with dreams, courage, and fire. And that completely changed the way she viewed aging, how she viewed women, how she viewed her own possibilities. She began asking about her grandmother's life, about the dreams she had in her youth, about what it was like to be young in her time. For the first time, they had real, deep conversations, woman to woman. But the impact didn't stop at the family. At church, 3 of Margaret's friends who had been critical began to question their own lives. One of them, at 68, decided to go back to school and complete the college degree she'd abandoned 50 years earlier. Another took up pottery classes. Margaret's transformation had become a mirror reflecting their own abandonments. And this mirror was uncomfortable, but necessary. And there's a lesson Margaret learned in this process that goes straight to the heart, and she made a point of sharing it with me when we talked about this journey. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about dancing or painting or going to the gym. It's about something much bigger, much deeper. It's about how we choose to live the years we have left. Margaret told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I spent 72 years believing that age was a sentence, that when you reach a certain age, doors close and you just have to accept it. But you know what I discovered? Age is just a number when you decide it is. The only thing that truly ages you is the mindset of the quitter." And it hit home, because she was right. Her body was 72, but her spirit was reborn, and spirits are ageless. She also spoke about regret in a way that made me rethink a lot. For years I was afraid to try and fail. I thought it would be humiliating, that it would prove me wrong. But you know what's truly humiliating? It's reaching the end of your life and realizing you never tried. The biggest regret isn't trying and failing. It's never trying and living with the what if burning in your chest until your last day. And she said it with an intensity in her eyes that left no room for doubt. She had lived this truth firsthand. But the most powerful lesson Margaret shared was about identity, about who we truly are versus who we've become through pressure, convenience, or fear. She told me she spent decades being the Margaret everyone expected, the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the loving grandmother. And all of these things were true, but they weren't everything. There was another Margaret buried inside, the dancer, the artist, the adventurer, and she thought she'd lost that person forever. But you discover it's never too late to be who you always wanted to be. That Margaret had never died. She was just waiting for permission to return. And the only person who could give that permission was herself. What struck me most was when she talked about the people who doubted her. She wasn't angry. She didn't hold a grudge. She understood that the criticism stemmed from others' fear of making their own changes. When someone criticizes you for pursuing a dream, it's usually not about you. It's about the dreams they themselves have abandoned and don't have the courage to resurrect. And Margaret learned to be compassionate about that, but not let it stop her. And perhaps the most raw wisdom she shared was this: no one is going to give you permission to live. You have to make that decision yourself, and you have to be willing to disappoint some people, to be misunderstood, to be alone sometimes, because the alternative is disappointing yourself every day for the rest of your life, and that is a much worse pain. What if you stopped waiting for the perfect moment and just started? But where Margaret is now, after all, this is something that will move you. Because if you remember how this story began, you'll see such a powerful contrast that it almost doesn't seem like the same person. That woman who woke up at 6:30, stared at the ceiling with empty eyes, and felt like she was just existing, simply no longer exists. She's been replaced by someone completely different, someone alive. Today, a year and a half after that radical decision, Margaret wakes up every day at 5:30 in the morning. Not because she has to, but because she wants to, because she has plans, she has goals, she has things she's excited about. She sips her coffee while watching the sun rise through the kitchen window, but now she's not just passively observing, she's planning her day. Monday and Wednesday she dances. Tuesday and Thursday she goes to the gym. Friday she paints. Saturday is the day she meets her friends from watercolor class for coffee and conversations that last for hours. Sunday she still goes to church, but now she actively participates in the choir, something she never had the courage to do before. She no longer lives alone in that silent, predictable routine. Her home has become a living space. The walls are covered with her paintings. The small studio she set up in the guest room has brushes, canvases, and paint everywhere. The living room has rolled up rugs so she can practice dancing at home when the urge strikes, and the urge strikes often. Her grandchildren now visit not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to spend time with her. Because Grandma has become someone fascinating, someone with stories to tell, someone who inspires them. Margaret also began volunteering as a watercolor teacher at a community center for other seniors. She's turned her own journey into fuel to help others begin theirs. And when she sees someone in their 70s or 80s picking up a paintbrush for the first time and discovering a hidden talent, she cries every single time, because she knows exactly what that means. She knows what it's like to reclaim a piece of yourself you thought was lost forever. Physically, she's also changed, not miraculously, but truly. She has more strength, more energy, more stamina. Her body functions better because she's finally taking care of it, not out of aesthetic obligation, but out of respect, because this body is carrying her through the best years of her life, and she's finally realized it. But the most profound change is in her eyes. That emptiness that existed a year and a half ago has simply vanished. Now there's a sparkle there, a spark of someone who is genuinely happy, genuinely fulfilled. And when you ask her about this whole transformation, she looks you in the eye and says with absolute conviction, "I wouldn't go back for anything. Not for comfort, not for approval, not for security. For the first time in decades, I am truly me." And that feeling is priceless. But now I need to ask a direct question to you who have made it this far. And I want you to be brutally honest with yourself when you answer, even if it's just in your head. What dream have you shelved, thinking it was too late? What version of yourself did you leave behind somewhere along the way, saying it was just youth, that it wasn't your age anymore, that the moment had passed? Because Margaret's story isn't just about her. It's a mirror. And if you're feeling a tightness in your chest right now, it's because some part of you recognizes there's something there waiting to be reclaimed. The truth Margaret's story reveals is uncomfortable, yet liberating. The only thing truly stopping you from starting over is the story you tell yourself about why you can't. It's not age, it's not wasted time, it's not what others will think. It's the decision you make every day to accept that things are as they are and cannot be changed, but they can. Margaret proved it, and she's not special. She didn't have superpowers. She only had the courage to take the first step when everything inside her screamed against it. So I want to invite you to be part of this chain of transformation. If this story touched you in any way, if you felt something change inside you while watching, leave a like below. Because this simple gesture shows me that stories like this matter, that it's worth continuing to share these messages. And go down to the comments now and answer, what would your new beginning be? What would you do if you knew it wasn't too late? Let's create a chain of inspiration here, where each person who shares their shelved dream gives courage to another person to share theirs. And who knows, maybe in a few months, you'll come back here and comment saying you took the first step. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate that bell. Because every week I bring you real stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things, people who proved that life can begin again as many times as you want. And I want you to be part of this community of people who believe that while there's life, there's possibility. And one more thing, tag someone who needs to see this today. That friend who keeps telling you it's too late. That aunt who abandoned her dreams. That colleague who's stuck in a routine that's slowly killing them. Send this video to them. Because sometimes we need to see someone else's story to have the courage to write our own. And before you leave, here, I want to leave one last thing in your mind. Remember, as long as you're breathing, you're still alive. Your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to pick up the pen and write the next chapter. And that chapter can begin today. It can begin now. It can begin with a simple decision that you will no longer accept living as a spectator in your own life. Right here now. What is the first step you will take this week towards your new beginning? See you in the next video. And who knows, maybe you'll come back here with a transformation story to share too.